How does this compare to a typical interview-style test?
The interview test has advantages and disadvantages. If you think about an interview, the advantages are that you've got face-to-face interaction between a candidate and an examiner. And the examiner can probe the candidate, ask easier questions and harder questions, find out the ceiling of the candidate's ability. The examiner can also change topics or change different lines of questioning and find out how the candidate performs on this line of questioning or this line of questioning or different task types. Although it's often thought that this is very authentic and that the interaction between the candidate and examiner is replicates real life, research has shown that that's not always the case. In fact, candidates try to use avoidance strategies or delaying strategies if they can't answer the question. They prefer not to expose their weaknesses, but rather show their strengths. Sometimes it's been compared to a kind of cat and mouse game between the examiner and the candidate, where the examiner is always trying to find the candidate's ability and the candidate is only demonstrating what they want to. So this is a communicative approach, and this is a widely used approach to testing, the interview approach. The Versant test has some similarities with this and again some differences. The Versant test, the construct is a psycholinguistic construct, and we define it as facility with the language. And that is the ability to speak at a conversational pace, to respond intelligibly and appropriately to questions, and to talk at a natural pace with the accurate language. So the advantages of this approach, like the interview test, we can also probe the ceiling of the candidate's ability by asking easy and difficult questions. We have a clever automated algorithm which presents various kinds of questions at different levels of difficulty to make sure that for any given test taker we're asking enough questions at their level of difficulty. We also change topics frequently and change item types frequently during the test. So from this point of view, we're probing and topic shifting rather like the interview test does. Back to the construct, the psycholinguistic construct, if you think about it, what's happening in the Versant test is just the same thing that happens in conversation. The test taker hears a stream of speech, which is basically a stream of sounds. They have to make sense of that speech stream and extract words from it, make sense of the different words. They have to decode the meaning of the words and decide what it was that the speaker was trying to say to them. They then have to decide what their response is going to be, their reply. They have to select their vocabulary. They have to encode those lexical items in a grammatically appropriate sequence. And then they have to articulate it intelligibly. And so this whole process of tracking what's being said, formulating answers, conceptualizing your reply, and then formulating your answer is the psycholinguistic constructs. And these are the building blocks of speech communication. This is what you need to be able to do in order to be able to have a conversation like you would do in an interview test. Now, this is very much informed by the psycholinguistic research. For example, we know that the final two steps of articulation, moving from grammatical encoding to phonetic articulation, takes about 40 milliseconds. And we know that the average time of silence between turns is about half a second maximum. So if the test taker doesn't reply to what they've heard within about half a second or a second, the chances are the speaker will continue speaking because they get uncomfortable with the silence, or someone else at the table will jump in and answer in place of the candidate. And so it's very important that the candidate can reply in a timely and appropriate manner, as opposed to interviews where perhaps the candidate is going to go, well, now let me see, and then give a slower answer which perhaps focuses on nice grammatical correctness and not necessarily a natural communicative flow that's established in the Versant test. So what we find is that we've got two different approaches to testing speaking. The communicative interview approach, which is widely used and depends on a perceived authentic interaction, and the Versant approach, which relies on core speaking skills, a psycholinguistic construct, but still uses in its scoring complexity, accuracy, fluency, which is the staple of language test assessment for speaking skills. And when you take these two approaches and you compare a student's performance on both approaches, they correlate very highly. This is why when we conduct validation studies and we have test takers take both kinds of tests, the scores are always very comparable. So the competences, the speaking skills that are assessed in both approaches are very similar.